So, God is a consuming fire. What does that mean? What does that mean in a new covenant context? Is God being a consuming fire just that he judges everything? What does it mean? Well, the fact that God is a consuming fire, there's two sides to the coin. And I'll mainly look at one side of the coin right now because that is what will involve those of us that know God and love him. I'm assuming you're watching me right now because you're hungry for truth and wanting to know God more. Now, the best way that I think we can approach this truth about God is that we can see this in Moses and the burning bush and Jesus at the transfiguration. When Moses saw the burning bush, and obviously that was God because the bush was burning, but it never burnt out. And not only that, God spoke from that burning bush. How did that burning bush change Moses? Well, firstly, the burning bush was a place where Moses was absolutely undone, like Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 6, when he saw the Lord high and lifted up. And he said a few verses later, I am undone. And the burning bush absolutely undone Moses. He took his sandals off. He was on his knees before the burning bush, this consuming fire that didn't consume the bush. Moses was changed forever. And we could say this burning bush was the presence of God. It was God shining, God shining like the sun to Moses and speaking, and out of that Moses was changed forever. And we also see this at the Mount Transfiguration, where by the way, Moses was there, and it says that Jesus shone like the sun. So again, there's this connotation of this burning bush, this consuming fire of God's brightness, of God's holiness, of God's presence. But if you notice, both with Moses at the burning bush and Peter, James and John at the Mount Transfiguration, they were undone. They were changed forever. And right there we have a wonderful truth about Moses and the burning bush. That when we approach God and we see God as a consuming fire, he consumes the dross. He cleans out and burns up that which is not from him. Everything impure just seems to be burnt up. But what's left? What's left is that which is pure and unshaken. When it says in Hebrews 13 that our God is a consuming fire, just before that verse, it says everything that can be shaken will be shaken. So God's presence, God's shining, God's fire, it consumes that which is not from him. It consumes that which can be shaken. Why? So what is left is pure and holy and unshakable. In fact, what is left is his image. We become transfigured before this burning bush. We become transfigured before this consuming fire. So now when I see God as a consuming fire, I see this as a great thing. And it humbles me when I come into God's presence and I see him as a consuming fire. I'm humble before God and I say, God, just like the priest at the bronze laver, Lord, wash me clean of anything that's not of you. Anything that doesn't harmonize with your image. Lord, burn it up, consume it, wash it away. See, that's the power of the consuming fire. His presence changes you forever. You're never the same when you come into God's presence, when you have an encounter with God. He changes you forever. He transfigures you. So in a sense, you could say on the other side of the coin that part of this consuming fire is part of the judgment of God, in that he is judging that which is not from him. And for those that don't know him, that should be a fearful thing, that God has his way in the end and that he judges that which is not of him. But for those of us that love him and love his appearing, and we could say that when our eyes are turned to Christ, that's his appearing. He appears to us. He appears in our thoughts, in our emotion. He's right there in our circumstance. That those of us who love his appearing, that consuming fire is something that is cleansing. It's a cleansing agent. It's washing. It purifies us and leaves us with that which is unshaken, that which is permanent, that which is powerful, that which is from him. And we are transfigured and changed forever. I'll just finish with a verse in Isaiah chapter 33, verses 14 and 15. It says this in verse 14, "Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings?" Well, that sounds like a judgment scripture, doesn't it? That sounds like God's out to get you. But the next verse tells us who will dwell with him. Who will dwell with these burnings? Here's the answer. He who walks righteously and speaks uprightly. That's you and me, friends. Who will dwell with these everlasting burnings? That's the very presence of God. That's us. That's those who love him, who are righteous. He transfigures us. God is a consuming fire. His presence changes us forever into his image.